Brooklyn and Queens, including where we are today, Jackson Heights, anybody that walks the streets knows there is not a lot of empty housing. If we are successful through this process, the 2010 census numbers would change, which would be a great result for New York City. It wouldn't change the process of determining our congressional representation, but it would change the population numbers that federal agencies use to apportion funds to cities and states. And it would change those population numbers for 2010, and that in turn would set a higher baseline for the population estimates the Census Bureau will make until the 2020 census. And although, let me say, Senator Kirsten Gillibrand is not with us today, she couldn't be, I want to thank her for working with us to develop the path we're using to make this challenge. We really do. She worked very hard on this. Now, Jackson Heights is a good example of the problems we've discovered. According to the Census Bureau, the population of Jackson Heights decreased. That's right, I said decreased by nearly 5,200 people, or about 5%, between the years 20 and 2010. I don't think they've ever tried to drive through Jackson Heights or walk the streets or gone into a restaurant or a store. The census also found that here in Jackson Heights between 2000 and 2010, there was a drop of some 1,300 occupied units and an increase of 1,200 vacant units. Give me a list of those vacant units. I can find you some people that would make them unvacant very quickly. In the Astoria and Steinway areas of northwest Queens, the Census Bureau reported similar population declines and large increases in housing vacancies, and everything we know about these neighborhoods tells a very different story. They are vibrant, vital communities, and the people who've tried to find apartments in these neighborhoods can confirm that there just isn't an abundance of vacancies. So it seems possible to us that the Census Bureau was unable to get in touch with people there, perhaps immigrants or others who live there and in other parts of Queens and Brooklyn, and that they simply recorded their homes as vacant. Let's get serious. There are more homes and they are not vacant. And so we've got to do something. Now, we got to work with the Census Bureau. Casey Cumberbatch, if you remember, worked very hard in the city to try to get everybody out to answer the count. But we still have a problem in these two boroughs. The result is that borough-wide, the Census Bureau determined the population in Queens increased by only 1,300 people during the past decade. That is an increase of just 0.1%. That can't be possible. As they say in the neighboring borough of Brooklyn, forget about it. These findings also fly in the face of what the Census Bureau has said about New York as recently as this past March 2010. Then it estimated that we were home to about 8.4 million people, but it now says that our total population is less than 8.2 million people. And that computes to an undercount accounting to approximately 2.6% of our city's population, or 250,000 people. So we're asking the Census Bureau to take another look at the data from Brooklyn and Queens and check to see if errors were made in compiling the final results. There's something else that makes the sizable undercount in our city especially hard to figure, and that's the higher rate at which New Yorkers answered last year's census, even as the participation rate for the nation as a whole remained flat. So we really did do a good job as getting some responses, but we think that they still undercounted dramatically. For the 2000 census, the population rate, the participation rate in our city of those who answered the census forms was 60%, but for last year's census it actually increased to 63%, and that despite the fact that we have more hard-to-count residents, immigrants, youth, single people, and others, perhaps more than any other locality in the United States. And we made this year-long full-court press to get New Yorkers to answer the census, and I think if we hadn't done that, the apparent census undercount would have been even greater. And if the Census Bureau had only come to us as they were preparing to send out their door-to-door enumerators last April and said, there seems to be a lot of vacant addresses in Jackson Heights and in other neighborhoods, we would and could have done more to step up our outreach efforts in those communities. In the future, I think such improved communication should be a practice. Now, to get to the comments on this undercount, let me turn the floor over to others. We have a long list of people.